The chime of a flight announcement echoed through the terminal, a sound lost in the cacophony of rolling suitcases on polished tile. John F. Kennedy International Airport was a river of humanity, flowing in all directions. Some faces bloomed with the smiles of new beginnings. Others were stained with the tears of departure. For me, it was just an impossibly large empty space filled with noise. I stood there, not waiting for anyone, not about to travel anywhere. I was simply an audience member in a grand theater, watching a play that had nothing to do with me. And then, in a single heart-stopping moment, my eyes locked onto a tall, lean figure. He emerged from the international arrivals gate, a man distinct from the crowd. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he wore a simple but obviously expensive shirt, tailored slacks, and leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. Every step he took was firm, radiating a quiet confidence. One hand pulled a large suitcase, the other held a phone to his ear, his voice a low, steady murmur. His sharp eyes scanned the area, as if searching for someone. My heart seized. Time seemed to warp, the sounds of the airport fading into a distant hum. All that remained was his image, crystal clear in my vision. Ethan, my son. 20 years. 20 years since I'd last held him. He had grown so much, from the tiny baby in my arms to this striking, elegant man. His face was a perfect blend of my features and his father's. But those eyes, their cold, detached quality sent a shard of pain through my chest. I wanted to run to him, to call his name, to wrap my arms around him and make up for all the lost time. But my legs were bolted to the floor. I had no right. I had forfeited that right long ago. The moment his gaze shifted in my direction, I spun around. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I hid my face, melting quickly into the crowd, terrified that our eyes might meet. Terrified he would see me and that a flicker of the hatred he'd been taught to feel would surface in his eyes. I kept walking, never looking back. I knew with a certainty that ached in my bones that I had no right to disturb his life ever again. 3 days earlier, the morning sun slanted through the small window of my room, a compact studio in Queens with just enough space for a bed, an old wardrobe and a small table. It was cramped but clean and orderly. I rose, folding the blanket out of habit, and opened the window. A cool morning breeze drifted in, carrying the sense of the city waking up off asphalt, exhaust and life. From my window, I could see a dense tapestry of rooftops and a web of power lines. The distant whine of a motorcycle was the day's first note. This was my world, the small, anonymous bubble I had lived in for nearly 2 decades. I went through my morning rituals in silence. A quick shower, a simple t-shirt and cotton pants. It was a routine as predictable and repetitive as the ticking of a clock. No excitement, no changes. And that was exactly what I wanted. A boring peace was my strongest armor. After a simple breakfast of oatmeal and toast, I locked my door and descended the narrow staircase of the walk-up building. The sun was getting stronger, the air growing humid. I walked the familiar route, past shops rolling up their metal gates, past groups of uniformed schoolchildren laughing and talking. Their smiles, their easy joy made me think of him. What would he have been like if he'd had a normal life like them? I quickly pushed the thought away. It was a dangerous indulgence. Thinking about what could never be was a direct path to pain. Soon, I arrived at my destination. A small diner with a faded wooden sign that read Maria's Place. The comforting smell of frying garlic and onions greeted me. Maria, the owner, a kind, stout woman, was arranging napkins at the counter. When she saw me, her face broke into a wide smile. "Ellie, you're in early. You want some breakfast?" "Morning, Maria. I already ate," I replied, my voice soft. Good. Then get inside. Looks like it's gonna be a busy one today," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. I went into the small kitchen in the back. Everything was organized just as I had left it the day before. I put on my apron, washed my hands, and began chopping vegetables, preparing the ingredients for the day. My hands moved on autopilot while I tried to keep my mind a perfect, silent blank. Maria was the only family I had. She'd given me a place to stay, a job and kindness without ever prying into my past. She only knew that I came from somewhere else alone, wanting to start over. That was enough for her. "You look tired, Ellie. Didn't you sleep well?" Maria asked as she came in to grab a pan. I forced a small smile. Just a little. It was too hot last night. Tell me about it, she agreed, nodding. When it gets slow this afternoon, you take a break. Don't work yourself to the bone. Okay, Maria, I said quietly. As the morning rush started, I was buried in work. The sound of spatulas hitting the griddle, of orders being called out, of customers chatting, it all drowned out the noise in my head. I loved these moments when I could just be Ellie, the diner cook. No past, no future. Only the present and the need to get the next order out on time. By the afternoon, the lunch crowd had thinned. Maria told me to take a break and get something to eat. I made myself a simple plate of scrambled eggs and sat at a small table in the corner of the diner. While I ate, I pulled out my old smartphone and scrolled through the news, a daily habit. Usually, I just looked at new recipes or general headlines. But one headline stopped me cold. The Cole dynasty's heir apparent, Ethan Cole, returns to New York to helm Cole Properties. My finger about to swipe past froze. My heart began to pound so hard it hurt. I clicked on the article, my hand trembling. The photo showed the same young man I would later see at the airport. He stood surrounded by a swarm of reporters, camera flashes illuminating his impassive face. His eyes were sharp, powerful. Standing beside him was an older woman dressed in an expensive silk suit, Madeline Cole. The spoon nearly fell from my hand. The article detailed his incredible success, his education from a top university abroad, his sharp business acumen, and his readiness to take over the family's massive real estate empire. Everyone praised him, hailed him as a brilliant new force in the industry. Cole, the last name I almost had. The name that had taken everything from me. And the last name of my only son. The past flooded back unbidden. The image of a tiny boy in diapers, the faint sweet smell of baby powder. The promise I had whispered into his ear on our last night together. Mommy will always love you no matter what. A single tear fell onto the phone's screen. I quickly wiped it away, glancing around, afraid someone might see. Luckily, Maria was busy with a customer at the register. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It was the past. It was over. He was in a world so far above mine I couldn't even reach it. He had a good life, a bright future. My absence from his life was the best thing for him. I tried to continue eating, but the food tasted like ash. I tortured myself by reading further, all the way to the last line, the one that made my heart nearly stop. K Property will be hosting an official welcome gala this Friday evening at the Grand Astoria Hotel to introduce Mr. Cole to business partners and key figures in the industry. Friday. That was in 3 days. The Grand Astoria, a place so luxurious I would never even walk past its doors. A welcome gala for him. A thought sparked in my mind, a reckless and dangerous idea I had suppressed for years. I want to see him, I just want to see his face one more time. Just once. Even from a distance. Ellie. Maria's voice startled me. What's wrong, honey? You're just staring into space. You haven't touched your food. She walked over, her face etched with concern. I quickly turned my phone screen off and placed it face down on the table. Nothing, Maria, I just have a bit of a headache. It was a clumsy lie. Oh dear. Well, go take some aspirin and lie down in the storage room for a bit. I can handle things out here. It's okay. I'm better now, I said, my voice weak. I couldn't let my personal turmoil become a problem for Maria. I stood up and cleared my plate, though I'd barely eaten. I went back into the kitchen and started working again. But this time my mind wasn't on my tasks. It had drifted away to a lavish hotel, to a gala that was about to happen, and to the face of a young man I could only call, in the silence of my own heart, my son. For the rest of the afternoon I was clumsy. I spilled soy sauce, I used the wrong spices. Finally, Maria insisted I go home. I returned to my small room in the early evening, much earlier than usual. The four walls that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a cage. I collapsed onto the bed and pulled out my phone, opening the same article again. I zoomed in on his picture, studying it over and over, searching for any trace of myself in his features. I tried to imagine what our lives would be like if we had been together. The more I thought, the more the tears flowed, unstoppable. Tears of regret, of longing, and of the guilt that had been eating me alive for 20 years. It was my fault. Everything was my fault. I was unworthy of being his mother. I had no right to even think of him. But the heart doesn't listen to reason. The more I tried to forbid it, the stronger the urge became. The more I tried to forget, the clearer the memory. The image of the welcome gala replayed in my mind. It was my only chance, the only chance in 20 years to see him with my own eyes, not just on a screen. I knew it was risky. I knew it was foolish. If Madeleine Cole saw me, it would be a disaster. She could destroy the fragile, quiet life I had built. Shatter it in an instant. But the desire to see my son's face, it was stronger than all my fear. I tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. My mind was a storm of questions and confusion. Should I go? Or should I stay here where I belonged? Would my presence cause problems for him? Or was this just for my own selfish satisfaction? But deep down I already knew the answer. I knew that no matter the cost, I was going. The next morning I went to work with dark circles under my eyes, my mind still consumed by Ethan and the gala. I tried to act normal, but Maria saw right through it. "Ellie, is something bothering you? You can tell me, you know," she said as we prepped food together. I hesitated, wanting to pour out all my heartache. But I couldn't. I couldn't drag Maria into my dark past. "It's nothing, Maria," I replied quietly. "It's just a distant relative I haven't seen in a very long time. He's having a big party." It was another lie, but one rooted in a sliver of truth. Maria nodded slowly. "And you want to go?" "I do. I just want to see him from afar. But I could never get into a party like that." My voice was filled with a self-pity I couldn't hide. Maria looked at me with sympathetic eyes and placed a hand on my shoulder. "If it's that important to you, you have to at least try." Her words lit a small spark of hope in my heart. "But how, Maria? They won't just let an outsider walk in." Maria paused for a moment thinking. Then her eyes lit up. "I have a friend, Sandra. She's the head of housekeeping at the Grand Astoria." My heart leaped. "Really, Maria?" "Of course. Let me call her. Maybe they need extra help that night." The idea was almost too perfect. If I went as a waitress or kitchen help, I could see Ethan without anyone suspecting a thing. I would become just another shadow moving around the party. Invisible, unnoticed. That was exactly what I needed. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to be a bother," I said, even as I silently prayed she would insist. "It's no bother at all. Sandra is always complaining about how hard it is to find reliable people." Without another word, Maria pulled out her phone and made the call. I stood beside her, my heart pounding as if I were waiting for a verdict. Maria talked for a few minutes, laughing and speaking of me with affection. "I do, Sandra. I have someone hard worker, very trustworthy. Her name is Ellie." "Yes, you do." "Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much." She hung up and turned to me with a huge grin. "It's all set. Sandra said one of the banquet servers called in sick for Friday. They need a replacement. She said you can report for duty at 4 p.m. I could hardly believe my ears. It was all happening so easily, as if it were scripted. I thanked her over and over, tears welling in my eyes. "Oh, stop it," she said, patting my back gently. "I think of you like my own family. Seeing you happy is all the thanks I need." Her words, "like my own family," made my chest tighten, a painful reminder of my real connection to Ethan. For the next 2 days I worked with a mix of excitement, joy, and terror. I focused on my job, not wanting to disappoint Maria. I took out the best clothes I own, a simple white button-down shirt, and an old pair of black slacks, and washed and ironed them carefully. It was the most professional outfit I had. The night before the gala I barely slept. Images of Ethan's face alternated with the cold, severe expression of Madeleine Cole. I prayed that everything would go smoothly. I just wanted to see his face, to feel his presence in the same world as me. That would be enough to last me the rest of my life. On Friday afternoon, I left the diner early. Maria gave me a hug and wished me luck. I went back to my room, showered, and put on the clothes I had prepared. I looked at my reflection in the small, cracked mirror. The woman staring back looked pale, her eyes filled with anxiety. I forced a smile, telling myself it would be okay. I took the subway to the Grand Astoria. When I arrived, I had to crane my neck to look up at the towering, magnificent building. It was another world, a world of luxury and status I had never known. I entered through the service entrance at the back, feeling like an ant about to enter a lion's den. A security guard checked my name and let me through. The back of house was a stark contrast to the opulent lobby, narrow corridors, the constant hum of machinery, and staff in uniforms rushing about. I found my way to Sandra's office. She was a petite, middle-aged woman who moved with a sharp, no-nonsense energy. She looked me up and down before giving a slight nod. "Maria told me all about you. Your job tonight is to help the banquet staff. Serve drinks, clear plates." "Got it." "Yes, ma'am," I answered softly. "Good. Get changed. Then report to the team lead in the main ballroom." She pointed to a neatly folded uniform on a shelf. I took the uniform and changed in the staff restroom. The simple black and white outfit made me blend in with the other employees. I looked at myself in the mirror again. I was no longer Ellie. I was an anonymous server. A small sense of security replaced my anxiety. When I reached the grand ballroom, I gasped. The enormous hall was decorated with breathtaking elegance. Crystal chandeliers glittered from the high ceiling. A crimson carpet stretched across the floor. On the stage, a large banner read, "Welcome home, Mr. Ethan Cole." My heart hammered against my ribs when I saw his name. The team lead gathered the staff for a briefing, stressing the importance of the night's guests and warning that there was no room for error. I nodded, absorbing every detail, trying to be as professional as possible. When the guests began to arrive, my work began. I carried a tray of champagne flutes, weaving through groups of elegantly dressed people. The air was thick with expensive perfume. The sounds of conversation, laughter, and a live jazz trio filled the room. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact, but my eyes constantly darted toward the entrance, waiting for the one person I had come to see. And then he arrived. A soft murmur went through the crowd. Everyone turned to look. The tall, imposing figure of Ethan appeared, with Madeline Cole at his side. Flashes from the press who were still outside pulsed through the doorway. Ethan wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. He looked even more impressive and formidable than in the photographs. He offered polite smiles to the guests who greeted him, but his eyes remained as cool and unreadable as ever. Madeline was just as I remembered her. Elegant, powerful, her smile warm but her eyes sharp and calculating. I quickly looked away, staring down at my tray, terrified that a single glance from her would be enough for her to recognize me. I saw him. After all these years, I finally saw him in person. Tears threatened to spill, but I bit my lip and forced them back. This was not the time or place for weakness. I was a server and I had a job to do. I continued serving drinks, keeping my distance, but my gaze followed him constantly. I watched him speak with powerful executives, his manner confident and articulate. I watched him raise a glass to his lips with practiced grace. Every one of his movements was seared into my memory. At one point, the master of ceremonies welcomed Ethan to the stage to say a few words. Thunderous applause filled the room. I stood frozen in a corner, watching the broad expanse of his back as he walked to the podium. He was the star of the night, the future of the Cole dynasty. I was just a shadow. Ethan gave a short, powerful speech about his vision for the company. Everyone listened, captivated. I listened to his voice, a voice I had never heard before. It was the voice of a man, not the cooing of the baby in my memory. After he stepped down, a group of young, well-dressed people, clearly his friends, gathered around him. Laughter erupted from the group. Then I heard a question that made my heart stop. "So you back for good, man? Or are you gonna fly back to see your mom in Europe again?" One of his friends asked casually. The atmosphere around Ethan instantly chilled. The smile vanished from his face. "I don't have a mother," he replied, his voice cold and sharp. "That woman walked out on me before I could even remember. Don't bring her up again." His words were a sledgehammer to my chest. It hurt so much I couldn't breathe. The tray in my hands trembled, the glasses clinking softly. I knew he had been taught to think that way, I knew it wasn't his fault. But hearing it directly from his lips shattered the last of my defenses. The pain was a physical thing, spreading through my body, but I had no right to show it. I could only lower my head, hiding my broken heart behind the mask of a server. His friend, looking awkward, quickly changed the subject. The conversation buzzed back to life, but for me the world had just ended. "He doesn't have a mother." The words echoed in my ears. It was a truth I had to accept, but one I was never prepared to hear. I swallowed the bitter lump in my throat, took a deep breath and forced myself to go back to work, walking through a world of happy people, a world I could never be a part of. I slipped into a quiet corner to compose myself, leaning against the cool wall, trying to gather what little strength I had left. My eyes blurred with unshed tears. I blinked rapidly, forcing them back. I couldn't cry here. "Excuse me." A soft voice beside me made me jump. A beautiful young woman in a pale blue dress was smiling kindly at me. She was one of the friends who had been standing with Ethan. "I was wondering if I could get a glass of water, please?" "Of course," I replied politely, bowing my head slightly. "One moment." I was grateful for the interruption. Pulled me back to reality. I walked to the bar, poured a glass of water, placed it on a small tray and walked back toward her. She was waiting patiently, standing apart from her friends. I approached carefully, but then the unexpected happened. Perhaps it was my shaken nerves or the dim lighting, but just as I was about to hand her the glass, another guest cut in front of me. I stumbled, the tray tilted, and the entire glass of water splashed down the front of her beautiful dress. "Oh!" she cried out in surprise. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," I gasped, frantically setting the tray down and grabbing napkins to try and blot the water. My heart plummeted. I had made a mistake, the one thing the supervisor had warned against. "It's okay, really," she said, her voice still kind despite her ruined dress. "It was an accident." But the commotion was enough to draw attention. And one of those people was Ethan. He spun around at the sound of his friend's cry. When he saw her drenched dress, his face darkened with annoyance. He strode toward us, his steps heavy. "What happened, Chloe?" he asked. "It's nothing, Ethan, just a little accident," she said, trying to downplay it. But Ethan's sharp, disapproving gaze landed on me. "How do you do your job? Can't you be more careful?" His voice was cold and harsh. It was the first time he had ever spoken to me, and it was with a reprimand. I froze, not knowing what to do, and could only stare at the floor. "I am truly sorry," I stammered. As I looked up to apologize again, our eyes met. It was only for a second, but it felt like an eternity. I saw the irritation and annoyance in his eyes. To him, I was just a clumsy server who had caused a problem. But to me, this close, his face was everything. His eyes, his nose, his lips, everything I had longed to see for 20 years was right there. So close and yet a world away. I stared at him like a fool, forgetting my place, forgetting everything. "Ethan, don't be so harsh. It's not a big deal. I'll just go clean up." Chloe's voice brought me back. Ethan tore his gaze from me and looked at his friend with concern. "Are you sure? I'll go with you." "No, you stay here and greet your guests. I can manage." She gave him a gentle smile, then turned to me. "It's really okay," she said softly, before heading toward the restrooms. Ethan watched her go, then turned his cold eyes back on me. "Get out of my sight," he said, his voice a low hiss. "And don't let me see you again." The words were invisible knives, slicing into my already wounded heart. I could only nod, numbly, unable to speak. I turned and walked away, a ghost returning to the service corridors. I don't know how I made it back to the staff locker room. The next thing I knew, my back was pressed against a cold metal locker, my legs so weak they could barely hold me. I slid to the floor, hugging my knees. And finally the dam broke. Tears streamed down my face, silent, racking my body with tremors. His voice, his eyes, his words, it was all too cruel to bear. I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at myself, at the fate that had brought us together like this. I should never have come. I should have stayed in my little world. My presence only brought him displeasure, just as Madeline Cole had always said it would. The thought of her made me jolt. I scrambled to my feet, wiping my tears away. I had to get out of here before anyone else saw me, especially her. But it seemed fate enjoyed playing cruel jokes on me. As I opened the door to leave, I came face to face with the elegant figure in the silk suit, blocking my path. Madeline Cole. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable, but I could feel the waves of displeasure radiating from her. The polite smile she wore for her guests was gone, replaced by a cold, hard mask. "You still have the nerve to show your face here, Eleanor," she said. Her voice was level, but it carried an undeniable weight of power and pressure. She remembered me. Even after 20 years. I froze, feeling like a cornered animal. The words I wanted to say were trapped in my throat. I was just working. I finally managed to choke out. It sounded weak, pathetic. Madeline gave a small, humorless smile. Working? Or is your work meddling in Ethan's life? She stepped toward me, each step feeling like it was crushing my heart. I thought we had an agreement 20 years ago, that you would never appear in his life again. I didn't mean to, I pleaded, my voice trembling. I just wanted to see him. From a distance. That's all. From a distance? She raised an eyebrow. Is making a scene that forces him to reprimand you what you call from a distance? She knew. She had seen everything. Fear began to grip me. I'm warning you for the last time, Eleanor, she said, her eyes boring into mine. Get out of here. And don't ever come back. Ethan's life is going perfectly. He has a bright future ahead of him. Don't you dare be a weight that drags him down. The phrase drags him down pierced my soul. If you insist on being stubborn, she paused, her gaze like a razor's edge, then I suppose I'll have to tell Ethan the truth about what kind of person his mother really is. Her threat made my blood run cold. She was talking about the accident, the wound I had tried to bury my entire life, the leverage she had used to force me away. No, I cried out, forgetting myself. Please don't do that, Mrs. Cole. Tears welled up again. I'll go now. I'll go as far away as possible. You and he will never see me again. I begged, my hands clasped together in desperation. Please just don't ruin his future. Madeline regarded me with a flat, emotionless stare, showing no pity or sympathy. Good. I'm glad you're still capable of some rational thought, she said coolly. Now go. With that, she turned and walked back toward the gala, leaving me trembling and alone. I knew what I had to do. There was no reason for me to be here anymore. Any faint hope of seeing him again had been utterly destroyed. Coming here was the biggest mistake of my life. I rushed back to the locker room, changed into my own clothes, and left without saying goodbye or collecting my pay. I just needed to escape. I walked out the same way I came in, through the dark, damp service entrance. It felt fitting for someone like me. Out on the street, the bright lights of the city only made me feel more desolate and alone. I walked aimlessly, my mind replaying the words of Madeline and Ethan. A weight that drags him down. Get out of my sight. I don't have a mother. Each phrase hammered home the truth. I shouldn't exist in this world. Or at least not in the same world as him. I found myself on an overpass, watching the cars stream by below. The headlights flared and vanished, like the people who pass through your life. My heart was a hollow, dark void. But then a thought surfaced. Before I disappear from his life forever, can I do one last thing for him? Not as a mother, but as someone who loves him with all her heart. I remembered a simple treat he loved as a baby. Warm, soft chocolate chip cookies. It was one of the few things I ever had the chance to make for him. That small memory was the only treasure I had left. I made a decision. I wouldn't leave as a broken, bitter victim. I would make him those cookies. A farewell gift. The last thread connecting us, even if he would never know its origin. I wiped my tears and walked down from the overpass with a new resolve. I headed back to Maria's diner. It was late and the diner was closed, but I knew where she kept the spare key. I would borrow her kitchen for just a little while. Inside, the familiar smells of spices and food calmed my frayed nerves. I turned on a single kitchen light and began to prepare the ingredients with practiced hands. Flour, butter, brown sugar, chocolate chips, every step was infused with love and memory. I remembered his tiny dough-smeared face as I tried to feed him, his gurgling laugh. It was one of the few happy memories I was allowed to keep. I baked the cookies carefully, the sweet, warm scent filling the kitchen. It was the smell of the past, of a love that would never fade. When they were done, I arranged them in a simple white box. Then I cleaned the kitchen, leaving it exactly as I had found it. I locked the door, and for the second time that night, I took a taxi back to the Grand Astoria. My heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with the determination to complete this final mission. I knew I couldn't go back inside, so I waited by the service exit. When I saw a kind-faced banquet server coming out, I gathered my courage and approached him. "Excuse me," I said softly. "I'm a friend of one of the staff who had to call in sick. I was asked to drop off this gift for Mr. Cole, but I can't go inside. Would you mind taking it to him for me? I invented another lie. The server hesitated. You can just say it's from an anonymous admirer, I added, slipping a $20 bill into his hand. He finally nodded. All right. I'll make sure he gets it. He took the box of cookies from my hands. Thank you so much. Really? I said, my hands clasped in gratitude. He nodded and went back inside. I watched until he disappeared from sight. My mission was complete. I had done what I set out to do. Whether he ate them or not, whether he felt anything at all, at least I had done it. I turned and walked away, not waiting to see the outcome. I knew better than to hope. I walked home with an empty heart, but in that emptiness, there was a tiny, persistent warmth. The warmth of doing something for someone you love, with everything you have, even if they will never know. From a shadowed corner of the service hall, I watched. The server I'd spoken to re-entered the thinning crowd of the gala. He found Ethan, who was standing with a small group. I saw him say something, holding out the box. Ethan frowned slightly, looking at the box with suspicion. He didn't reach for it. My heart stopped. I saw him say something dismissive to the server, whose face fell. He bowed and started to walk away. But then the worst thing that could have happened. Madeline, who had been standing nearby, joined Ethan. Her eyes fell on the box in the server's hands. What's all this, Ethan? She asked. Nothing, grandmother. Just someone sending a gift, he replied coolly. Madeline's eyes narrowed as she looked at the simple white box, as if some instinct was warning her. From whom? I don't know. An admirer, apparently. Madeline let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. These days there are so many social climbers, she announced, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. They see someone of status and try to latch on, hoping for some benefit. You must be careful, Ethan. Especially with gifts from people with no background. Who knows what they might have put in it? Her words were a direct assault. She wasn't looking at me, but I felt them as if she were shouting in my face. My pure intention was twisted into something dirty and opportunistic. Ethan nodded in agreement with his grandmother. Throw it out, he ordered the server, his voice devoid of emotion. I don't want it. At his command, my world went black. It was truly over. My last effort, my final act of love, was discarded like a piece of trash. I stood frozen, a statue in the shadows, as I watched the server walk to a corner of the room, lift the lid of a waste bin, and drop the box inside. That image, it was a perfect reflection of my place in his life. Worthless, unwanted, and disposable. Tears I thought had run dry began to fall again. But this time they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of utter defeat. I had nothing left to fight with. No hope remained. Madeline was right. I was nothing but a weight. The only way to protect him was for me to disappear. For good. I turned and walked out of the hotel for the last time. This time I had a destination. I walked straight to the Port Authority bus terminal. I bought a ticket for the first bus leaving the city, not caring where it was going. I just needed to get as far away as possible. I went back to my room, packed a few essentials into a small bag, and left everything else behind. I wrote a short note for Maria, thanking her for everything and apologizing for leaving without saying goodbye. I couldn't face her. Back at the terminal, I sat and waited silently among strangers. No one paid me any mind and I paid them none. My heart was an empty chamber. I had accepted my fate. From now on there would be no Ellie waiting for her son. There would only be a nameless woman, living out her days waiting for the end. Meanwhile, back at the nearly empty gala, Chloe returned, having cleaned up her dress. She found Ethan standing with his grandmother. Sorry I was gone so long, she said with a smile. It's fine, Ethan replied, but his expression was still vaguely troubled. Chloe sensed the tension. Is something wrong, Ethan? You look upset. It's nothing, dear, Madeline answered for him, her own smile a little too tight. Just a bit of idle chatter. But Chloe knew it was more than that. Her eyes drifted to a nearby trash can, where she saw a small white box sitting on top of the refuse. It looked like a gift box. It struck her as odd, but she didn't say anything. After the party, Chloe and Ethan left together. What happened with that server? Did she get in a lot of trouble? Chloe asked, still feeling uneasy about the incident. I have no idea, Ethan answered dismissively. She was probably reprimanded, as she should have been. She was careless. His answer disappointed Chloe. She didn't seem to do it on purpose, Ethan. She looked terrified. People who make mistakes have reason to be afraid, he said, his tone still cold. Forget about her. Chloe sighed softly. She knew Ethan was a perfectionist who detested incompetence, but sometimes he seemed to lack any empathy. On the ride home, she couldn't get the server's face out of her mind. Her eyes had been so sad, heartbreakingly so. It was more than the fear of being punished. It was a deeper, more profound sorrow. And the way she had looked at Ethan when their eyes met, it was a look of such painful longing that it stuck with Chloe. The next day, Chloe decided to call the Grand Astoria. She didn't want to complain. She just wanted to make sure the woman hadn't been fired. She got through to the banquet department and spoke to Sandra, the head of housekeeping. There was a little accident last night, Chloe explained. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Which server was that, ma'am? Do you remember her name? I don't remember her name. A woman in her 40s, maybe? Slim with fair skin. Oh, that one, Sandra said, seeming to recall. Ellie. But you don't have to worry, ma'am. She wasn't punished. She quit. Quit? Chloe exclaimed, surprised. Why? I have no idea. She left without telling anyone, didn't even collect her pay. The woman who recommended her can't get in touch with her either. This new information made Chloe even more uneasy. It didn't make sense. Why would she run off like that? It was as if she were fleeing from something. A suspicion began to form in her mind. This was about more than a spilled glass of water. Being naturally observant and intuitive, Chloe started connecting the dots. Ellie's sorrowful eyes, Ethan's unusually harsh reaction, Madeline Cole's strange behavior, and the mysterious box of pastries thrown in the trash. She remembered Madeline's comment about social climbers. It had sounded like a targeted accusation. Could it be? Was Ellie the one who sent the gift to Ethan? And why would he reject it so cruelly? Her curiosity piqued. Chloe decided to dig for the truth. She started with the little she knew, the name Ellie, and her connection to Maria. She called Sandra back and asked for Maria's number, claiming she wanted to check on Ellie and see if she could help. Seeing her good intentions, Sandra gave her the number. Chloe called Maria and introduced herself politely. She explained what had happened and asked about Ellie, feigning concern. Maria sighed heavily over the phone. I can't reach her either, dear. She left a short note and just disappeared. I'm so worried about her. Her voice was thick with anxiety. She's a good person, you know, but she has a sad life. A deep sorrow she can't tell anyone. A deep sorrow? Chloe asked carefully. I don't know the details. I just know she has a painful past. And it has something to do with the son she had to leave behind. The word son made Chloe's heart skip a beat. An image of Ethan flashed in her mind. Could it be possible? It had to be a coincidence. But her gut told her it wasn't. Maria, Chloe asked gently, could you tell me anything more about Ellie? Whatever you feel comfortable sharing. I promise I won't cause any trouble. I have a feeling something is very wrong here. Maria was silent for a long time, weighing the request. Finally, her concern for Ellie won out. She decided to tell Chloe what she knew. I met Ellie almost 20 years ago. She was heavily pregnant, looked like she was running from something awful. I felt sorry for her, so I gave her a place to stay. She gave birth to a son at a small public hospital. She named him Tawan, the son. The son. A simple, warm name. So different from Ethan. A name that connoted power and fortune. What happened to the baby? Chloe asked, her heart pounding faster. Not long after she gave birth, a well-dressed woman came to my house, Maria continued. She came with her people and forced Ellie to sign papers, giving up Tawan for adoption. She ordered Ellie to leave and never see her son again. In exchange, she wouldn't press charges over something that happened in Ellie's past. Ellie cried until she had no tears left, but she did it for her son's future. After that day, I never saw Tawan again. And Ellie, she became quiet, withdrawn, with a sadness that never left her eyes. Chloe was speechless. Her heart ached for Ellie. The image of the well-dressed woman became terrifyingly clear in her mind. Madeline Cole. It all clicked into place. Ellie was Ethan's birth mother. She hadn't abandoned him. She had been forced away. All the hatred Ethan harbored for his mother was built on a lie. A monstrous, cruel lie. Chloe felt a surge of anger. Anger at Madeline for so coolly destroying 2 lives. And she felt a deep pity for Ethan, who had grown up with a baseless hatred. She had to do something. She couldn't let this secret remain buried. Ethan deserved to know the truth. But how could she tell him? Would he even believe her? All she had was Maria's story. It might not be enough to break through 20 years of indoctrination. She needed something more concrete. Something that would force Ethan to face the truth. Her mind went back to what Maria had said. The something from the past that Madeline had used as leverage. That had to be the key. Chloe thanked Maria and promised to try and find Ellie. Then she began her new mission. To unearth a buried past and find the truth. Chloe started her search at the most difficult point. The history of the Cole family. She knew it was risky. Madeline Cole was powerful and well-connected. Any suspicious inquiries could easily be traced back to her. She began by searching old news archives online, typing Cole properties, and setting the date range to 20 to 22 years ago. Most of the articles were about business deals, new real estate projects, or Madeline's society appearances. She scanned every headline, looking for any anomaly. After hours of searching, she found it. A small article on the Metro page of an old newspaper. The headline read, "Tragic accident on West Side Highway claims pedestrian's life." The story described a late-night car accident where a vehicle had swerved and fatally struck a pedestrian. The article identified the driver as Kitteridge Kit Cole, Ethan's father. It also mentioned that a female passenger was in the car with him but was unnamed and had sustained only minor injuries. Chloe's heart raced. This had to be it. She reread the article, noticing several oddities. The story ran for only 1 day and was never followed up. The details of the incident were vague, as if someone had deliberately suppressed the story. Chloe decided to dig deeper. Using her father's connections as a retired lawyer, she asked him to discreetly pull the old police report for that accident. Her father was hesitant at first, but seeing her determination, he agreed to help. A few days later, he handed her a copy of the case file. What she read inside made her gasp. The file named the female passenger in the car with Kit Cole that night. Her name was Eleanor Vance. But the most shocking part was the witness statements. Several witnesses had told the police that they saw the woman driving the car at the time of the crash, not the man. They claimed the two had switched places in the chaotic moments after the accident, before the police arrived. These statements were in the official record, but they had been ignored during the legal proceedings. The case was quickly closed, with Kit Cole receiving a suspended sentence for reckless driving. The witness claims of a driver switch simply vanished. Now Chloe understood everything. Ellie wasn't the villain. She was the scapegoat. That night, she may have been driving, but Kit, her lover, had protected her by taking the blame. But that act of love had become the weapon used against her. Madeline Cole had twisted this crime into a tool to expel her from her son's and grandson's lives. She had painted Ellie as the reckless cause of a man's death, a degenerate unworthy of the Cole family name, and forced her to leave in exchange for her silence and a better future for Ethan. The puzzle was complete. The story was more tragic and cruel than she could have imagined. Chloe clutched the papers, her anger at Madeline and her sympathy for Ellie solidifying into a hard resolve. She had the proof. Now came the hardest part. Confronting Ethan. She arranged to meet him at a quiet coffee shop. Ethan arrived, his expression cool but curious. "What's going on, Chloe? You seem unusually serious." Chloe took a deep breath. "Ethan, what I'm about to tell you is going to be very confusing and probably make you very angry." She told him everything. Her conversation with Maria, the story of Ellie and the baby named Tawan, and finally the car accident from 2 decades ago. At first, Ethan listened with an expression of disbelief and irritation. "Are you telling me that woman, that clumsy server, is my mother?" he scoffed. "Chloe, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." "It's not ridiculous, Ethan," she said firmly. She slid the copy of the police report across the table. "This is the proof. Read it." Ethan flinched slightly at the sight of the official document. His skepticism gave way to hesitation. He picked up the papers and began to read. Slowly his face changed. The cool composure dissolved into tension, then into turmoil. He read the pages again and again, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. His father's name, Ellie's name, the witness statements. It was all too real to be a fabrication. How is this possible? He whispered, more to himself than to her. The walls he had built around himself his entire life began to crack. Grandmother, she lied to me? All this time. His voice was laced with pain and disbelief. The world as he knew it was crumbling. The hatred he had carried for his mother was a fiction, crafted by the person he loved and trusted most. I'm sorry, Ethan, Chloe said softly, placing a hand on his arm. I'm so sorry to hurt you like this. But I thought you deserved to know the truth. Ethan didn't answer. He just sat there staring at the papers, his eyes vacant. The night of the gala flashed in his mind. The woman's face, her pained expression when he met her gaze. His cold words, "Get out of my sight." And the box of cookies he had ordered to be thrown away. A wave of profound guilt, a feeling he had never truly known, crashed over him. What had he done? He had treated his own mother with a cruelty that now horrified him. I have to talk to my grandmother, he finally said, his voice hoarse. He shot up from his chair and rushed out of the coffee shop, leaving Chloe to watch him go with a worried heart. Ethan drove home in a daze, his heart a chaotic storm of anger, sorrow, confusion, and guilt. He stormed into his grandmother's study without knocking. Madeline looked up from her book, surprised. Ethan, you're home early. Is something wrong? Ethan didn't answer. He walked to her desk and slammed the case file down in front of her. Madeline jumped. Her eyes fell to the papers and her face went pale. A flicker of shock and fear crossed her features before she masked it with a practiced calm. What is this? She asked, her voice steady. You know exactly what it is. Ethan yelled for the first time in his life. Why? Why did you lie to me for 20 years? You destroyed a woman's life, you destroyed my life, all to protect the family name. Madeline's face was ashen. She knew her secret was out. Ethan calmed down. Let me explain, she pleaded. Explain what? He roared back. Explain how you took my mother away from me? Explain how you taught me to hate the woman who carried me for 9 months. Tears, for the first time since he was a small boy, streamed down his face. The fortress of strength he had built around himself had crumbled. Seeing him like this, Madeline's own heart broke. She rose and came around the desk, reaching for his hand. I'm sorry, she whispered, her own eyes filling with tears. Everything I did it to protect you, Ethan. Protect me. He yanked his hand away. You call this protection? Making me grow up without a mother? Turning me into a heartless man who would verbally abuse his own mother to her face? Is that your protection? He told her about the gala, about the box of cookies, the image haunting him. Do you have any idea what was in that box, grandmother? Do you know how much courage it must have taken for her to do that? And I threw it away. I threw her away. Madeline collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. I was wrong, I know I was wrong, she finally admitted. I was scared. Scared the scandal would ruin your father's future. Ruin our family. I was short-sighted. I thought getting rid of her was the best solution. I never imagined it would become a wound that would hurt you so deeply for so long. I accept all the blame. Ethan looked at his weeping grandmother. His anger began to fade, replaced by a vast, hollow emptiness. He loved her, but he couldn't forgive her, not now. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her tears. He got in his car and drove, with only one thought in his mind. He had to find her. He had to find his mother. He had to apologize, even if his apology meant nothing now. He called Chloe. Help me, he said, his voice desperate. I have to find her. Of course, Ethan, she replied firmly. We'll find her together. Finding Ellie was not easy. They started with Maria, but she had no idea where Ellie had gone. She had vanished without a trace, save for the one goodbye note. Ethan used all his money and connections, hiring private investigators to search for an Eleanor Vance. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Weeks passed. Ethan couldn't eat or sleep. He neglected all his work at the company, dedicating every waking moment to the search. The image of his mother's pained face haunted him. He reread the case file, trying to comprehend the years of silent suffering she must have endured. He hated himself for his ignorance, his coldness. Chloe stayed by his side, offering support and coordinating the search. She went back to the Grand Astoria, talking to every employee who might have seen Ellie. She got one small lead from a janitor, who remembered seeing Ellie regularly take a specific bus line that headed toward the western outskirts of the city. It was a sliver of hope, but Ethan clung to it. He and Chloe drove the entire bus route, stopping at every diner, every apartment building, every neighborhood. They showed people the blurry security camera photo of Ellie, but no one recognized her. One day, on the verge of giving up, they stopped for a bite to eat at a small, unassuming diner. The sign read Maria's Place. Ethan's heart leaped. He got out of the car and walked inside. He saw a stout, kind-faced woman working at the grill. "Excuse me, are you Maria?" Ethan asked. The woman turned surprised and nodded. "I am. What can I do for you?" My name is Ethan," he said. "I'm looking for a woman named Ellie." At the name, Maria's expression changed. She looked from Ethan to Chloe, her eyes filled with suspicion. "Why are you looking for her?" "She's my mother," Ethan said directly, his voice cracking. Maria's eyes widened in shock. She put down her spatula, studying his face intently. "Tawan," she whispered. Ethan nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Yes, that's me." Finally, Maria opened up. She told them that Ellie had indeed worked there, but she was gone now. Ethan's hopes sank again. But then Maria remembered something. "Wait, when she first started, she gave me a copy of her old ID." She rummaged through a drawer and found a small creased piece of paper. It had a photo and an address from a small remote town in western New York. It was the only real lead they had. Ethan thanked her profusely, and they immediately set off. His heart hammered in his chest the entire drive. A frantic mix of hope and fear. Would she be there? And if he found her, what would he even say? After hours of driving, they reached the quiet small town. They followed the address to a small, dilapidated wooden house. It was silent, abandoned. A neighbor told them the house had been empty for years, after the owner passed away. Ethan felt his knees buckle. His last hope was evaporating. But then the neighbor added, "Though a few days ago a woman came back, cleaned the place up for a day or so. Then she rented a room over by the town market." Ethan desperately asked for a description. It matched Ellie perfectly. They drove to the town market, and then he saw her. She was helping the owner of a fruit stand arrange apples, dressed in old, worn clothes. Her face was pale and tired, but he recognized her instantly. Ethan parked across the street, just watching her, unable to move. His heart felt like it had stopped beating. Chloe placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go on, Ethan. Go to her." He took a deep breath, opened the car door and stepped out. He crossed the street slowly, each step feeling impossibly heavy. Ellie was focused on her work, not noticing his approach. Not until his shadow fell over her. She looked up slowly, and in that moment their eyes met again. Ellie froze, the apples tumbling from her hands. Her eyes were wide with shock and disbelief, as if she were seeing a ghost. They stood there looking at each other, the noise of the market fading around them. Time seemed to stop, an entire conversation passing between them through their gaze, alone of pain, of longing, of guilt, and of love. Ethan tried to speak, but the words were caught in his throat. A million apologies were lodged in his chest. Finally, he thought of the one thing that had connected them, the one thing he had so cruelly destroyed. He swallowed hard against the lump in his throat and spoke, his voice trembling. "Those cookies, could you make them for me again?" It wasn't a fancy apology or a long explanation. It was a simple question heavy with meaning. It was an admission. It was a plea for a second chance. It was the key, turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for 20 years. At his words, the tears Ellie had been holding back finally broke free. She didn't speak. She just nodded again and again, as 2 decades of anguish began to wash away, replaced by the first glimmer of a new hope. It would take a long time for their wounds to heal. It would take tremendous effort to rebuild what was broken. But in that moment, under the afternoon sun in a small town market, The long journey of forgiveness had finally begun.